Okay, so we got a question this week. And the person said, a friend asked me the question if I believed in demons, quoting that 1/3 of the angels fell and were supposedly demons. Were there at one time demon fallen angels, though now finished through the cross? And for unbelievers, can there still be demon activity, or were demons the result of paganistic thinking and there was no such thing? You know, the farther I go in my understanding of finished, and just on the goodness of God and identity, the less, if not nothing, but the less I believe in demons and Satan and the devil and all of that in the way that I originally understood it. Originally I understood it as, they were just demonic entities, they were fallen angels, and just that, there was hell and there was, all of this demonic stuff, and we needed to war against it. And yes, Jesus defeated it, but, Satan's been let loose. Hi, Ben. Satan's been let loose in the earth. The devil's been let loose until he gets chained up for 1,000 years and yada, 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 yada. Right. And so, and I truly believed it. I mean, I really did. And Steve and I, we would definitely do warfare, and we would bind and we would loose. And, there was a devil around every corner. And we made sure we would plead the blood, and all of those things that were just so exhausting and really kept me distracted from the goodness of our Father, right? Because I was so demon conscious. I wasn't even son conscious because I was so demon conscious. I don't know if all of you have that experience, but in Pentecostal circles, I mean, that's what we did. And so when I started letting go of that, gosh, you know what? It just suddenly I don't know. It's like all the demons disappeared. I don't know where they went, but they were just gone. When my thinking changed, all of those demons that I thought we encountered, all of those spirits of this and spirits of that, just gone, which kind of makes me think they probably weren't there to begin with. They were just kind of in my own thinking, my own imagination. And we have a powerful imagination. So I just took a couple of notes this morning. The Christian myth that equated fallen angels with demons didn't even arise in church until the 2nd and 3rd centuries. So it wasn't even a thing, So if it wasn't even a thing, you got to kind of wonder, is that what John was writing about? Because John's the one that wrote it. The only mention of fallen angels is in Revelation, so if it didn't even come about until the 2nd or 3rd century, I kind of doubt that that's what John was talking about, in our own Christian understanding. The Greeks gave the word daemon, which is demon, the same meaning as a god. So the Greek idea of demons first appeared in ancient Greece through the works of Plato, which was actually before Christ was born, right? So it was Plato. Demons were demigods with divine power existing between heaven and earth, playing the role of intermediaries between humans and gods. So I thought that was interesting, because the more I read in scriptures about demons and about all of that, you realize that a lot of it seemed to be connected with idolatry, and I was asking Rion before the show, before the class, if there was, well, he mentioned that in Africa, there's a lot of belief in demons and demonology and just deliverance from demons and all of that. And so I asked him if they also, worship gods or, demigods. And he said, yes, especially in the remote villages, modern places, towns, that's becoming less and less, if not just not even there. So I really think it has to do with idolatry. Paul would go into these pagan places and they would have all these gods set up, and don't forget, idolatry deals with identity, right? It's all about identity. So I looked up in the Mirror Bible. Let me pull up my notes real quick. Boy, I just had my notes and then, okay. Let's see. So Revelation 12 is the only mention of fallen angels as demons. And I'll just do my notes real quick and then we'll open it up for discussion. So then a war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But the dragon was not strong enough, and no longer was any place found in heaven for him and his angels. And the great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was hurled to earth and his angels with him. Francois says about the book of Revelation that it's much of what John saw reflected in the Jewish mind as familiar prophetic pointers and symbols. So I know we read the book of Revelation and we hear about the last days, and that the earth will go away and that Jesus will come back and Satan will be, bound for 1,000 years. But this was a very Jewish book written to a very Jewish audience about things they were familiar with. We've made a whole story out of it that probably isn't true. Daniel. So Francois says that the book of Revelation was written in 68 AD. And then in 70 AD, is the fall of Jerusalem. So Daniel has this picture also of the war in the heavenlies and of things happening and in his prophecy. And the Lord tells Daniel to seal up the book, right? Because it's going to be 480 years until that happens. Then John gets a prophetic revelation and the Lord tells him not to seal it up. The Lord tells him to keep it open, to unseal it because the time is short. Makes me wonder if a lot of what we read in the book of Revelation, not all of it, but a lot of it has to do with 70 AD that was coming. That was a huge, big deal, for these Jews. Revelation 12 in the Mirror Bible, that same verse we read says, Michael and his celestial cohorts led the war in the heavenly realm against the dragon and his cohorts. Michael means who is like God. The context of the onslaught against the human race has always been identity, not demons, identity, right? Not fallen angels, just it's identity related. The dragon's influence was totally demolished and rendered powerless. Not a trace of its presence was found in the heavens. So the great dragon, the ancient Ophis or serpent, also known as the devil or Satan, whose sole mission was to lead the entire inhabited world astray, was cast down to the earth dimension together with all of his cohorts. The Greek word serpent, which is ophis, comes from optomai, which means to gaze, and in this case, to present a visual idea through illusion. Luke 10:18, Jesus said to them, I saw Satan falling out of heaven like lightning. These all represent mindsets that have blindfolded mankind since the fall of Adam. That's out of the Mirror Bible. Francois says that the words for serpent system are interchanged, including dragon, Satan, devil, right? The accuser, all of those words all mean the same thing, all referring to the same enemy. Revelations 20 says, and he overpowered the dragon in its every disguise as the old serpent in the garden in Genesis, also called the devil or going under the name Satan. The dragon is the source system of accusation, empowering the beast of the religion of performance and self-effort with its inevitable fruit of judgment and condemnation. In the symbolic language of the book of Revelation, the judgment of the dragon, the beast, and the whore, which is the counterfeit trinity, is not a judgment against an entity, but against a corrupt, mindless system. And I know that's a lot of information, but what I hear all the way through that is, the serpent, he was in the Garden of Eden, and who was the serpent, right? It was just that old lie that we are not like God. It was always identity related. So I think, as for fallen angels, let me get back to the question. As for fallen angels, yeah, I think that's just a myth that we've read into that story. As for unbelievers, can there still be demon activity? Not in the way we understand it. I think they can have definitely a fallen mindset that they operate in, that carnal mind, that deceitful lie of them not being like God. And so then they can operate out of that false, distorted identity, and behavior flows out of that. Were demons the result of paganistic thinking? I believe so. I don't think that there's I don't think there actually are demons in the way. I think we've been taught to believe something, and we've believed it so long that it's really hard for your mind not to snap back to that original thinking of what a demon is, and I think when we start to realize that it's really dealing with a mindset, diabolos, because of a fallen mindset, because of the fall, right? Dia meaning because or through, and balo meaning cast down or the fall, right? So when we start to see it like that, then we realize that there is no outside entity that comes against us. There is no God and Satan warring against one another. You know what I mean? There is no demonic war in that sense. There's just, the only problem we've ever had is in our mind. But that's my take on it. And, it just, the more that I get away from that original thinking about demons and the devil, my life has more peace, it just does. There's no spirit of sickness, that's just, I know when I wrote the chapter, and I say in the chapter that spirit had to do with mind, it had to do with thoughts, it had to do with feelings. In the Hebrew, the word Satan, accuser or adversary, was never a capitalized name. It was never a proper noun. It was only an adversary. It was one who opposed God. It was one who opposed his plans. That was it. Their understanding of all of that was not the same as ours. So some of it, I think, or all of it, actually, I think is just Christian myth. But that's Robin's take on it. You guys, it wasn't a chapter that I wrote to tell you this is how you have to think. It was just a chapter to get you to think. It was a chapter to give you some information that maybe you didn't have, so that you can make an informed decision rather than just believing things that were passed down to you, truly generation to generation. Any comments, any insight? I would love to hear it.
I have a question.
Yes.
Where do you think that original mindset of "are you like God" came from?
That I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I mean, you're talking about in the garden, right?
Yeah, in the garden.
Obviously the tree, but I don't know. Like all of you, I'm still learning all of this. Like all of you, I'm learning to think differently. And thank God for Francois, who has made most of this so understandable and so graspable, but maybe, I don't know where that original thing came from.
Maybe somehow it came with our free choice when God gave us the free will.
Possibly. I would think that would be a big thing, right? Because he did give us a free will. So anybody else have any insight on that? Rian, you must have insight.
I think he froze.
I think so. Or he's thinking really hard. Yeah. Ben, you must deal with a lot of that in New Orleans.
Yes, we do. We're the hoodoo capital of the world. And it all stems from wrong thinking. And when we look at all of that and you consider it, and as I studied the mindset of mankind, because of the fallen mindset in the garden, it goes through all of humanity. And all evil is a person acting outside of their sonship.
Mhm.
They're putting in their lives what's not supposed to be there, and they're acting it out, what they think and what they believe. So that's, even though they're still children of God, they're acting beneath their sonship.
Mhm.
And that's why they do the things that they perceive. And it goes back to man has power. And whatever they believe they can do, they do it.
I
And
agree
that's
with
what's
that.
done.
The word evil in Hebrew means dysfunctional, you know, so
Yes.
dysfunctional just means, you know, you think about a dysfunctional family, it's just not operating like a healthy family would operate.
Right.
There's no love in that, you know, and when the children of Israel built the golden calf, you know, and they built that idol, and Moses comes down from the mountain. It wasn't just these people dancing around a gold calf, you know, there were orgies going on. There were just these frenzied minds, you know, they just, I don't know, it's kind of like you enter into a different part of you just, your mind just, you know, and you become a totally different person. And we've taken that to be that the person is demon possessed or oppressed, you know, but I think it's just our minds are powerful, you know, and our behavior is going to flow out of our sense of identity, you know, and they were worshiping this golden calf, and your mind becomes frenzied. I've seen movies where, you know, in other countries, and they're doing this idol worshiping this of these gods, and they look possessed, you know, but are they, or did they just enter into just this dysfunctional place of someone they're not, you know, their identity gets wrapped up in that. Rian, you have any?
And
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ben.
as you say that, when I look at as believers, or we know we live in our identity and from the finished work, that all power belongs to our Father, and He's given us all power. So any other power doesn't even exist to us.
Mhm.
So if we have all power, I don't care what other power there is, I have all power.
That's right.
And we don't actually walk in that. We think that, like they say, well, you know, the devil is busy and the devil has power. Well, who gave him the power? When the Father said He destroyed him, number one, He destroyed all his work, and I mean, destroy is annihilate. It is of no use. Where does He get power from when He said all power in heaven and in earth has been given to me?
Mhm.
So it's something strange in that. Like you say, the way people think in their mindset, they allow that to happen in their lives.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, no matter what your definition of a devil or a demon is, you know, they have no power, you know, whatever that definition is, even even if it's a fallen mindset, you know, it's still no power over us. You know, we have power over that, you know. Did Rian freeze again? He holds so still, or he's frozen. I think he froze again. Yeah. Anybody else have any insight in this? I know it's a hot topic. It really is. I'm surprised that it is such a hot topic, that people are so unwilling to let that go, you know, to let that old understanding go and to embrace a different idea. Yes, Janet.
Oh, of course my dog's gonna speak too. You know, we were talking about back in the garden, you know, the tree, and how did that transpire, where our mindset became distorted from believing that we were one with the Lord. You know, here we were enjoying this companionship, oneness, communication in the cool of the evening, you know, God was breathing on us, and then we choose like a less than inferior lifestyle, really, deceived into it. And I have a son-in-law, and I try to talk to him about this new understanding and the Mirror Bible and France, and he talked, because he's steeped in Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you've ever heard of Jordan Peterson, but he has he's kind of a psychologist, has lots of videos out there, YouTube videos. And he says it was there, the tree of knowledge of good and evil was the birth of our consciousness. And I'm looking at him like, what? I feel like that's not what it was. I feel like it was we actually began to believe a distorted understanding of everything from that point on. I don't feel like it was the birth, but he thinks, it was good that this happened because we understood the difference between good and evil, and it was the birth of our consciousness. But I feel like now we have an understanding that our consciousness is the Holy Spirit in us, and it's always been there, but now we understand that we know right from wrong. We don't need any law or any rules because the law of love operates in us. The law of spirit of life in Christ Jesus is operating in us. So we know, everyone knows right from wrong. They never had to been taught it. That's how I believe. But I get stumped every time in conversations with him because he thinks that was when consciousness, our conscience came about.
So he thinks
there's a really just to kind of piggyback on that, Janet. There's a difference between consciousness and conscience.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's saying conscience or consciousness.
Enlighten me.
Well, no, I'm not, that wasn't like the point. I'm not like here to enlighten.
But you might be right. Maybe I'm hearing it wrong.
Well, because if you also, Bruce Walkup, Dr. Bruce Walkup, he has several videos. He's pretty close with Baxter Kruger, but he talks about the conscience and how good and evil, when we became aware of good and evil, we became aware of our conscience, and that living according to our conscience isn't necessarily the design of Father for us either. That is what kind of enslaves us to good and evil. And that's why in Hebrews it talks about that we needed our consciences sprinkled with the blood of Christ, because we were so bound to that good and evil mindset of always measuring, is this good? Is this bad? Is this good? Is this bad? And we see it in everything. Even last night we were watching a movie and it's always good and evil, good and evil, good and evil. And it's not the tree. We were designed for life. We were designed for the tree of life. And we weren't designed to have a conscience aware of good and evil. That was the one comment I just wanted to kind of add and tag on what you were saying. I don't know if that
will help.
Resonates at all.
That resonates perfectly. What was the name of the fellow you were talking about?
Dr. Bruce Walkup, Wuchhope. And he's with Parachoresis Australia.
really
the Trinity in You. He has a really good series called The Gospel and Mental Health, where he goes into a lot of that. And then the other thing I was just going to comment really quick, Robin, was just, I don't know if you've read David Bentley Hart at all. He's Orthodox, and he just talks about how it's really kind of, I don't know, I'm still kind of wrapping my mind around it, but I've just been reading him lately. And he talks about how the human will is really also in and of itself kind of a myth, because in the end, everything that we're desiring is God. We just don't know it. And so it like looks like idolatry, or it looks like frenzy, or it looks like, going after drugs, or it looks like alcoholism, or it looks like all these different things that it looks like we're choosing with our own free will, but really what we're truly desiring is what we were wired and designed to desire. And that's him.
That's good. I like that.
I do too. I really like that. Thank you. I know I have a lot of friends that are still really into that. God has a lot of problems, and we're supposed to cooperate and co-reign. And our job is to really get rid of the demons. I mean, you know what I mean? Like really expose all of the demonic activity, including demonic activity in Christians. They'll just say, "Oh, you just have a lot of them." They're just, and they surface and I don't know. Don't be afraid of them because you have power over them. But I was there, done that. I don't want to go back. Everything in me says no. I mean, our mind is powerful. I don't believe that they are they're defeated. The works, any works of that fallen mindset has been defeated. So I totally believe the way Francois believes, but it's hard because we're living in such a contradictory world right now, where there are a lot of things that seem to be like evil manifestations of an evil nature. That is confusing to me.
It's interesting that, you had two trees, the knowledge of good and evil, and then tree of life. And when I was listening to Melinda, I was thinking about, we've made the book of Revelation all about these powers of good and evil, all of this demon stuff, all about good and evil. And really, when you just turn to life, I mean, when your focus just becomes life, becomes him, that others just falls away. It's not that hard to let go of that thinking when you choose life. I don't want to choose good and evil. I don't want to always be battling evil. I don't want to do that. I just want to choose life. I want to focus on him, which is probably why it's my least favorite subject to teach on. I don't normally teach. I had one chapter and I almost left it out of the book because I told Steve, this one's going to cause a lot of stuff. But the only reason I put it in the book was because that does interfere with healing. That warfare mentality interferes with understanding we are healed, and so that's the only reason I like it.
I just want to put something up with regard to, like I've just mentioned, from our side here in Africa. I can especially remember when I was at Bible school, you were experiencing real demonic manifestations. I've been leading worship and I've been preaching where people they would throw chairs at you, and they would actually raise from the floor, and they would and you would, and I think a lot of people, when they come into this unconditional, perfect, completed, and I love what Melinda has just said, the difference between conscious and and being conscious about we are in a new consciousness. So one of the things I realized, the driving forces behind a lot of demonic stuff is the whole aspect of fear, and being that God is angry at you, the anger of God. And I think there's such a huge frequency surrounding fear, in the same way that love has got a powerful frequency. And I think quantum physics really sort of just brings the scientific part of that energy behind fear, or around fear, or how you want to put it, and then the energy surrounding love. I mean, I've had, about a few years ago, 6 years ago, when I was sort of exiting, I was one of those guys you would go to if you want to get rid of all the demons in your house. So you call Pastor Jan, he's coming to your house, and then he's going to get those demons out of the house. And as grace was flooding and the finished work of Christ was flooding my heart, say 6-7 years ago. So most of them, they didn't realize that there's a new consciousness, which is the Christ consciousness. It is finished consciousness that I was walking around. And I went to a lady that she was like, her eyes were like bulging out, her eyes were like turning around, and they were calling me to go and do deliverance. So I knew I won't go and do deliverance. I would just purely go and tell her that God is not mad at you, and he is amazingly in love with you.
Yeah.
I came there, everyone, even the whole family, was standing outside of the house, because this young girl, she was 17, she was throwing everything around in that house. I walked in there, with perfect peace, perfect persuasion. It is a done deal. And I just walked, I looked at her, tears, and when I saw, I realized the alienation that has taken place in her mind, and the distance, the perceived distance that she thinks that God is angry at her. And I just told her, listen here, God's not angry at you. And I'm just here tonight just to tell you I love you and I want to give you a big hug. Everything normal, perfectly normal. Nothing wrong. Everything. There was a total. Everyone came in and was so shocked, And again, now I was now again this great, whatever, pastor, whatever. But again, I believe especially a lot of demonic stuff are driven. And I think where the church came in is I think the whole thing with regard to the limited atonement, the whole concept of an angry God, the way God's wrath was poured out, you know, on the cross against humanity, that type of thing. So that created a sort of energy field. And I just think, it's again what you've just said about our imagination, about our imagination carries energy. I think more than now, everyone sort of understands the energy that our emotions carries when we walk. And I think the goodness about the finished work is the glory energy that we sort of release wherever we go. We oozing the glory, and that glory there's no space for any demonic understanding. There's just no space to perceive any demon, and this is just, I believe, when people just clearly hear God's not mad at me, and they just totally hear, that he has never been separated from me. He has never been, and I think, once people get the grasp, and this is just the amazingness about truth, because, John says, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And it's this truth of it is finished, it's a completed deal, it's done. Unfortunately, I believe that many times God would take us like Jesus did, and we would have, we've all received the ministry of reconciliation, and reconciliation sometimes means you have to step down in the darkness of that person. You need to enter the darkness, and especially you guys would know with counseling, you can't stay up there. You need to actually go in tears. You need to go in and start to cry with that person, because this is the goodness that we've got. We can enter into their darkness, remove all alienation, remove all sense of delay, of separateness, work with them where they are at that moment, just like Jesus did with us, like Spirit of our Father did with us. He came and visited 2,000 years ago and gave us the blueprint of how we can go and we can visit. You can't just play down, whatever people are experiencing. You can't just say, man, this demon thing, you need to get right. You are still old covenant. I mean, you are still, no, that's not Christ-like. That's not love. Love would always seek to invade, or not invade, that's the wrong word. Love would seek to go into your darkness, share in that darkness, and then write a new story, not write a new praise report. Listen, you are, loved by your Father. You are fully accepted into the beloved. Christ in you. This is the revelation I'm bringing to your life. There's never been a day in your life and especially, the concept which Jesus did in the Gospels, you are totally forgiven. Totally. God, there's nothing that God has got against you. You are totally forgiven. And the power of forgiveness, which flows from the blood of Jesus, is such a powerful revelation once that thing hits people's lives, because there's just so much shame. Because shame, guilt, and condemnation, I think, is the breeding ground for demonic activities. Whenever somebody, and even in my life, when I experience deep shame, deep condemnation, deep, all those things that nowadays people are talking about, these things sort of, in your body, like, the video that you shared with on Facebook, Robin, the video that you watched
Malcolm,
from
Malcolm Smith.
What's his name?
Malcolm Smith.
Yes, about anxiety. We know that all these things has got spiritual origins, but again, spiritual. What are we talking about when we're talking about a spiritual origin? It's a darkened mind. It's an alienated mind, and I just think it's always, we can recognize now, what is taking place there, instead of just being a victim of whatever energy we sort of, or whatever somebody experienced. But my take on this is that again, like we just said, we know now it's an alienated mind. It's a mind separated from the love of the Father. But we need to go visit that. We need to go into the darkness, and we need to bring the light and shine the light and allow Holy Spirit sort of, just to shine the light on that person. I think that's usually the take for me now in ministry is to visit people and to bring the light in whatever darkness they find themselves.
I love that. I do. Our minds are powerful. I was going to mention the video that I posted on Facebook, the Malcolm Smith, and he talks about how the negative thoughts, those negative emotions, go and store themselves. They take up residence in different organs in your body, so our minds can produce healing in our bodies, right? Those thoughts and those feelings of wholeness, of completeness, of identity, can release healing in our bodies. And just like negative thoughts, and Rian, you talked about a darkened, alienated mind. I mean, you read in the Gospels about the boy who would throw himself in the fire, and if our minds can produce healing in our body, through our right thoughts of identity, our right feelings of identity, then those darkened and alienated thoughts and feelings can also produce things in our body. When I go to get a massage, my masseuse told me that she uses something called a tuning fork, and it just brings balance into your body. It was no big deal, but she was telling me that if a person has an addiction, if they're a drug addict or an alcoholic, they can't handle the tuning fork. They literally will get off of the table and run out of the room. It affects their physical body. They just can't deal with that balance and harmony. And so sometimes, we see somebody, we've heard stories about people who are demon possessed and they're frothing at the mouth, or like Jesus, throwing himself in the fire. It's just that darkened, alienated mind. I really do believe that is producing physical effects in the body, which that should encourage us, that understanding who we are in Christ, understanding what he did, having that awareness will produce physical effects in our body. That's huge.
Robin, what do you think of the idea of just demonized, since we're on that topic, because we used to be part of a deliverance ministry too, and we did all that for a couple of years. It really caused a lot of trauma. And I think I'm wondering, as I'm just in this conversation too, the thought of even labeling someone demonized, or labeling you have a spirit of this, even in that act, we're alienating the human mind. Don't you think? Like, it's a separation to label someone like that and go, oh, you're this. And then that person is like now seeing themselves apart from Christ as this ugly, thing, identifying with this ugly spirit, and to even put that label on someone is such a bondage as well, don't you think?
Oh, I do. I mean, you heard Rian talk about, he went in with that girl and just spoke identity, and there was a release in her mind, from the wrong thinking, from that identity. So yeah, we can definitely box people into labels and identities just by calling them demons. My daughter, my oldest daughter, was part of a church, and it was a good church. I mean, it was a church we went to as well, but she got involved in their what was she was doing their mentorship program. So anyway, she would have discipleship classes and all of that. And they were doing, one of the pastors asked, okay, how many here have been delivered from anything? And everybody raised their hands except my daughter. And they really came down hard on her and said, well, that's not possible. Everybody needs deliverance from something. And so she felt less than in a group on deliverance. And she called me up and she said, Mom, they say I need deliverance. And I said, don't let them lay hands on you. You don't need deliverance. We were all delivered 2,000 years ago. one big deliverance ministry done, so she was fine. But I mean, people can put that on you, and so I agree with Rian, when you just speak identity, just identity, and it just releases people from the bondage and darkened, alienated. We're just used to seeing those words in the Bible, and I think we just kind of run past them. They just don't mean anything anymore. We've become desensitized to them. But when you really stop and think about that and allow Holy Spirit to really minister to your heart, what did a darkened, alienated mind, what was that? What's that even like? Not that I want to experience it, but Lord, what would the effects be in a person's life? And then he starts bringing to your mind the boy throwing himself in the fire, or the children of Israel dancing around a golden calf, having orgies and doing all of these things. And maybe in Africa, seeing them, dancing around fire, and I don't know, Rian, but you know what I mean? They're just, they're just worshiping these things, and you realize, oh man, it's so far from the knowledge of God. And it's just, your mind has taken over, your imagination has taken over, and you're just living life dominated by fear, just 100% fear. So.
Then you wanted to say something.
I was just wanting, as you were speaking, Rian, about the wrath of God has been promoted. So that has what's brought the mindset of many people, that the wrath of God is upon them. And Robin, I think you need to teach on that, because if you look at the wrath, when you study what wrath is, it means an intense desire to right a wrong. And it's like I look at a mother with a child. If you mess with her child, you incur her wrath, because she's protecting him. She's going to do any means not for you to hurt them. And that's what I believe Father God said. And we living in the wrath of God right now when we talk about it is finished. Well, what did he finish? Anything that hurt his children, he destroyed it. And I really look, so I thank God for his wrath, for me, because he stopped everything that was hurting me, the wrong mindset. Even they little devil, they talk about, he destroyed the works of the devil, because what? It wasn't for his children. And we think the wrath of God is on us. He gonna destroy us. No, he's destroying everything that comes in your life that is not for your sonship. He destroyed.
Wow.
That's right. That's right. I was reading a book on 70 AD because there's a lot of teaching on it, and I don't know that much. So I really wanted to get some information and background on it. And when he was describing 70 AD, because you can see that, wow, that is the wrath of God, not against a person, against a system, and the death and when you read about what happened, it just was so bad, just what Rome came in and did to the temple and to the Jews. But in all of that, the beautiful part of just, it was done. I mean, it was just finished right then, done. There was none of that system left. It was just I really saw that word severing in it. There was just a severing from that system, and it was violent and it was full of wrath, just the passion of Abba, just to finish that whole system so that mankind could walk free, and just liberated in all of that. So yeah, it's just the passion of Dad who says no. I like that what Baxter says, it's God's no. I refuse to let you go. You are my sons. This is who you are, and I will destroy everything that comes against you. Gosh, mamas, don't we do that for our kids?
Yeah.
There is nothing. We rise up as mama bears. There is nothing coming in to touch our kids, right? I mean, it just, But our dad's like that. He just know everything that would hurt you, that would hinder you. And he still does that, right? He's the same God yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, right? He is always removing those things from our life that would just harm us. Yeah. Well, I hope I answered some of your questions on demons. Again, not my favorite subject. I personally would just avoid the whole thing. Demons, hell, all of that, not my favorite subjects. I figure Paul didn't teach on it. I don't really like to teach on it either, but it's such a stronghold in Christians' minds, and one they're not so quick to let go of. We still walk, with our carnal sight, with our just natural sight, with things we see. And so we allow what we see to determine what's true. We see sickness and disease in the world, so we just determine that that's normal, and we see what we would think of as demon possession or oppression. And so we think, well, this is true, and yeah, we've got the book of Revelation, to back us up, which wasn't even written to us, right? So, we have to stop allowing things we see in the natural to determine what our life looks like. We are whole, we are complete. Truly, everything is finished. There is nothing left that is not finished in our life. There is nothing that hinders us except our own hindrances, things that we put up to block what's true in the word, what God has said is true about us. Other than that, you're just free, and this week we're reading Minister of the Tabernacle, which is such a good one. And if you haven't watched the Malcolm Smith video I put on the group page, it's so good. And that one deals a lot with, just things it's just casting your care, anxiety, but how those produce feelings on the inside that get stored in our body and can produce sickness, but it gets us in knots on the inside. But that Minister of the Tabernacle unties all those knots, right? We don't have to wonder about, oh man, yeah, but I thought this and I thought that. He's in there, he untangles all that, right? And then the other chapter, this next one might be a bit of a challenge, unless you guys have all read ahead and already read it, but the one on our Christ identity, that one can be, hopefully that one will just expand your thinking, but next week we want to talk about specifically our Christ identity. So if you have any questions on that, give us questions. And Rian and I want to talk about, specifically being spirit-led. We are co-creators with God, right? We are co-creators. We are masters of all. We are in charge of our lives here on earth. But there's a fine line between being self, or as my friend Bill says, meology, right? And just being independent selves where we're just, creating whatever. And then there's that being led by the Spirit and him knowing. Paul said all things are permissible, but not all things are beneficial, and so he knows what is good for our lives and what we need, and what we need in the future, and all of that. And so Rian and I, we really want to talk about that, because there's a lot of teaching right now on co-creating with God, which I am 100% all for co-creating with God. That's who we are, right? But there's also a lot of teaching about just, hey, just imagine it. Just imagine whatever you want and you can have it. And I don't know that we want to be doing that. We definitely want to work with Holy Spirit on those things and be led in all things, right? And co-create. The whole point of co-create is the word co, right? It's together with, otherwise we're just creating all on our own, and that can get us in trouble. So we're going to talk about that next week a lot. That's it, guys. I love you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Tuesday group, thank you so much for joining me on Wednesday. Steve decided he wanted to drive back from the farm yesterday, and so we had an early morning, 4:30 in the morning, and we drove 7 hours. So I was a little tired when I got home. So thank you guys for that. We only have 2 more weeks left, and then we're done, and then you guys can have your Christmas. Love you guys. I'll see
Thank you so
next week.
much.
Love you.
Bye.
Love you so much.